You can just put your hands together and welcome them, and I'll let these two bat off with each other.
Thanks, Taylor. Well done. Yeah, my first book, Stoke, Nat and I were actually talking at Crescent Head in 1994. There was an event there, and Nat and I started saying, yeah, we should write books. Nat had his done like in 2 years, right? When did your Nat's Nat and Nat's That come out, Nat?
About 10 years ago, Bobby. Yeah, I can't remember exactly. I don't think of those sort of things, but keep going.
He got it out real quick. Took me about...
All I had to do was grab all my diaries and join them all together. I've been having diaries since I was 10 years old. My mother was very, very forceful about, this is what you have to do. I give you the diaries, you fill them up.
Greta, your mother.
Greta was very fussy, you knew her.
I knew.
She was a school teacher.
Yeah.
So she wasn't having any shit off me, I tell you.
Greta and Harold, Nat's parents. We lived next to them at Noosa, my wife and I, in 1970, 71. But I knew them way before that, when we used to go to Nat's place back in the early 60s. Where Nat and I used to go down the south coast of Sydney with a guy called Lee Cross, who published Australia's first surfing magazine, simply called Australian Surfer. Anyone remember that magazine? You got one? Okay,
Oh,
I've got
not many.
In my book, there's some photos of it, and Lee was an amazing character, just a total bum surfer. Had the beautiful big Ford spinner, and on Friday nights he'd pick me up from where I was living in an old car at Avalon, and we'd roll down. Sometimes we'd go to Collaroy, pick up Nat. Another guy called Min Mouse was part of the gang. We'd roll down to the south coast.
And Gopher,
Rodney Sumter. We'd fill this old Ford with, I mean, how old were you, Nat? 14?
yeah,
And
14 and told to, given a can and told to go and steal petrol so we could drive down the coast in the bloody...
Yeah, we all had to steal petrol to get down to the south coast and back. And because cars didn't have any locks on the petrol caps in those days. So that's the only way we could get around. And we'd surf the south coast for the weekend, crash at someone's place down the south coast. There'd always be friendly chicks and invite us back to their parents' place, and it was like that. And the parents would be stoked to see these young surf rats from Sydney visiting for the weekend around Wollongong and all the breaks south of there. And I remember seeing Nat the first time we were surfing a spot called Bellambi Point.
Yes.
And the surf was like this big, tiny. Nat did what he called a reverse head dip. A head dip was a thing you did in the 60s where, as the wave broke and you were trimming along on a longboard, and as the wave broke, you'd stick your head in the curl, right? So head dip. So Nat did what he called a reverse head dip. He got a little wave this big, he got barreled totally. You couldn't see him or the board, except his head was sticking out through the barrel. And he was just running along through the whitewater with his head sticking up. So Nat's, I always said that guy Nat, he's going to kill it. This guy's amazing. And a 14-year-old kid doing this. So here he is now, multiple world champion and author and great skier and traveller and raconteur. Can tell a good story.
Still just about standing up, unfortunately. Well, fortunately, but it's just unbelievable. The number of things that go wrong with your body as you get older, I can't even believe it. It's getting old.
Isn't it a pain, Nat?
It's not all it's cracked up to be, that's for sure. But it's interesting, you know. I won't even try and find the part I was trying to find in that. I was trying to find a part of Nat's Nat, which I thought was relevant to Byron Bay, which I talked to Taylor about, and thanks Taylor, that I was going to read today, but I can't find it, and I haven't got the patience and time right now to go through it all while I'm sitting in front of you. But what I was going to tell you about was I think a very indicative Byron Bay story. Is it all right, Bobby, if I just tell you?
Go for it, Nat. We've got an hour, man.
We got an hour?
Yeah.
Okay, well, the first Byron Bay story that I really think is important and gives a good understanding of this area was when we had this, I don't know whether, has the police station changed the actual way it was set up? Was it still on stilts?
Still on stilts, yes.
Yeah, but they've closed it in around it on the bottom, haven't they?
Yep.
It always used to be open and it had stilts. And when we were first living here, I moved here in 1969. So I guess it was about 70. It was when Rusty was here. You know, a lot of us were here. And we had this friend of ours called Russell Hughes, and in those days when you got a fine for doing something, little petty thing with your car, you could go and pay it at the police station. I don't know whether that's a state anymore, but you can do it. So Russell, anyway, he stopped in to pay a parking fine at the police station, and he happened to notice out the back, that has a quadrangle still out the back, right? I don't know, I haven't been in that police station since they tried to lock me up years ago there, but it's a beautiful area, and it's a quadrangle they have out the back, and these people had been given perfect marijuana plants, the police, to grow as an example, because they had been told there was a problem with marijuana in this area. So they had an example then of what marijuana looked like, so then they couldn't confuse it with Stinking Roger, so they had to smell it, and they had to, because it looks a lot like Stinking Roger. So the Russell saw this over the back of the policeman when he was paying his $10 fine for parking wrong here, and he came back to, I happened to be making a board for him right then, up at my place, was in Bangalow Road, just out of town here. And Russell came up and said, "You wouldn't believe what I've just seen. These bloody pot plants, they're perfect and they're just budding and they look unbelievable." And, Jesus, I don't know, what are we going to do, And so Russell put this very easy that night. He just went down there and crept in under the police station, and he grabbed those half a dozen prime marijuana plants, and we brought them back up, and we hang them up in my shaping bay up there for the next week or 10 days. Every day looking at it, and it became known as the Wallopers Bob Hope. and we smoked it for, I think, about 6 months, because there was beautiful heads, Rusty, you would have smoked that crap. It was
I didn't inhale that.
Yeah, but anyway, it was a wonderful thing, and that's the story of the Wallopers Bob Hope. And I know I write about it in here, probably in more detail, but anyway.
So I've got one in here too, very similar about...
what have you got there, Bobby? I haven't even seen your new book.
I'll give you one later, Nat. I'm stoked to give you one. Actually, the style of the book is a little bit based on Nat's book. I gave the brief to HarperCollins. The way John Whitsick laid Nat's book out is so cool and so elegant. I said, please, give me something like that. Well, they've done a 2-colour print, which made it even more special. But my book's got like about 150 photos this time, compared to the first one, which only had about 50. A lot of great photos there by Albie Falzon and John Whitsick and Doug Andrew. Remember Doug Andrew?
Yeah, very well.
Great surfer.
He just got back from a caravanning adventure around Australia with his wife just last week or the week before.
He's probably here somewhere too. Doug, if you're here, yell out.
Oh no, they're all here.
Yeah, he'll show up. Anyway, so there's 150 good photos. Yeah, my marijuana story was about when we were up at Noosa. It's in my first book, and it was about when the combi rolled up full of marijuana, and the guys that just
who owned that?
Come from the Hunter Valley. It was Peter Wright and Warwick Smith.
Oh, I remember Warwick.
Yeah, and
from the Canopus room.
That's right. And Kevin Platt was with him. I think some of them are dead now, mate. Yes, from very suspicious circumstances.
Incidentally, I've got one thing I was going to tell you in private, but I can tell you now because they may, in fact, a lot of people might know. I just had an email this morning from Chops' wife.
Yeah.
You knew all about that?
Yes. Very sad.
It was a sad thing, Peter Lascelles, Chops, he died of a heart attack mowing the lawn last Thursday night, actually.
He's in my book because he started cord surfboard. Him and his brother started cord surfboards at Caloundra when Russell Hughes and I got the sack from working at Hayden's because we were smoking pot.
Rightly so.
And he said, "You're going to..."
No.
So Ken Adler was installed as the new shaper, and I got the sack. So we went down and started cord surfboards.
And the money came from what's Chops's
mysterious father.
What's Chops's? No, I know all about that one. But what was Chops's
his
brother's name?
Dave Lascelles.
What was his nickname?
Not Poncho. Come on.
Come on, Bob, you're good on this shit. I tell you,
he's in the book.
Well, you look at that, and I'll tell you what. Chops' son, he's got the classic name. His son is called Cutlet, which is a small chop. And I always loved Cutlet. I had a son called Cutlet. Yeah, I thought it was great.
Oh man.
Anyway, you can't remember his name. Anyway,
I'll get it.
These two brothers came here with their mother from England, and Chops right up until he died last week, got a. Him and his brother were getting invitations by the royal family all the time, because they're connected to the royal family. They're illegitimate children of a liaison, and she was sent to Australia, his mum, and given that land up in the Glasshouse Mountains.
Yeah.
That farm. That's how they got that.
Oh, man.
And so she came out here as the lover of one of them. So.
Oh.
Anyway.
Which, yeah, they started that cord surfboards in
Cord surfboards, which was
Caloundra.
just a small amount of money to save you guys from running around and...
Yeah, not having income.
Yeah. And you know where they set up cord surfboards? This is a great story. In the middle of a bloody old water tank.
Humphrey Lascelles.
Humphrey!
And there it is. It's on page 64.
Good, got it.
Dave Humphrey Lascelles Mercedes is the nicest car of our gang's vehicles. My white Chevy Tornado, LG's 52 Chev, which is coastal cruisers, not highway machine. Humphrey was a young guy whose family had just moved to the Sunshine Coast, always hanging around Hayden's, dreaming of becoming a surfboard maker. Seemed to have plenty of time and some money, so we often stooged him to take us to Noosa when it was cracking. We'd save our Chevys, we'd all jump in Humphrey's Merc. Yeah, a bit more about that. He's driving to Sydney, Bob Cooper's with us, he pulls out the pipe and starts smoking pot. 1965. What, reefers? Drugs? Marijuana? You're crazy. Oh, all the good guys in the States are smoking it.
Yeah, well, see, no one really knew much about it then. I mean, you know, I don't know what year it was, but sort of I didn't know anything about it until...
You're a bit later, mate. We were 65.
Mike Doyle tried to corrupt me. That was 68
Yeah.
at Makaha. And I told him there wasn't any way I was touching that stuff.
Until, like, 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It took at least 2 weeks.
Yeah. Well, my story goes on right through how the drug era exploded around Australia, and surfers were the first guys to get into it because we had such connections with California. But if I can flip to page 208, I just want to...
208.
Yeah, I'm telling that straight after the drug dealing started in 1967 came the criminals, and more deaths. Kenny Alexander, Robbie Barnes, Peter Wright, others, mates, dead, drugged. Some of the criminals were friends and acquaintances. They were guys I simply knew as Stoke surf mates, and suddenly greed manifested its ugly self. Surfers who simply saw big dollars in importing and dealing. Then I actually talked about my friend Russell, who quickly, my mate Russell, progressed to doing the jobs, making the flights and the money. By 69, he'd lobbed back in Byron and invested. A young surfer buying up property. He told me, "That's it. I've got houses in Byron and Lennox now. What more do I need?" But just 6 months later, he was in Afghanistan doing a much bigger deal. And he got busted in Afghanistan. It was really hard to get him out back in 1970. It's a heavy time. Anyway, so yeah, my story is a lot about that, what happened to the culture of surfing after 67 and how it exploded and then how it imploded. Because we had the utopian dream going. We really believed that we could change society. And I'm sure Nat and Rusty, and as I was saying the other night at the launch, you know, like, we really believed that we were going to achieve utopia living up here, and that the brotherhood of surfing would just go on forever, showing the world how to live. But human imperfection, greed and stuff, it all slipped in and it slowly fell apart. The dream died. And but you know, personal dreams continued, and personal searches for truth and spiritual enlightenment. So they're covered by, a lot of people's lives are covered in here as we went on into the 70s and 80s. And of course, all the way, it's surfboard design and shapes and what we were writing, what we were developing. So the book's full of boards, of course, but the backtrack is people. And I'm pretty proud of the book because it's much gutsier and grittier than my first book. I had to lay it on the line in this one.
Good. I can't wait to read it then, Bob.
Good, Nat.
So did you tell the truth about what happened with Sam?
No, I didn't go into it, please.
No, there's nothing to go into it.
So everyone knows what Sam is?
Bob got a little carried away and said that he shaped the board that I won the championship on, but it got. That's not true.
I never said that.
And he's corrected it all since then.
I never said I shaped it.
All these people in America reckon you did.
No way. I never said
anyway, Bob didn't, but Bob certainly had an influence on it. So that's all right.
We do discuss how Nat came to Noosa in 66, just before heading off to the World Contest in San Diego and blowing the Yanks out of the water with his surfing and becoming the world champion. Is everyone familiar with that story and that era? There's some incredible movies footage around. Yeah, a lot of guys know that stuff. Nat surfing Sam was the most explosive thing that happened to Californian surfing when, Rusty, am I right? Like Nat surfing in waves this big in San Diego.
But it wasn't just the, it wasn't,
yeah.
You know, I mean, sure, the board was good, but as you know, the real story is that I'd broken the fin right before it. Albie had that picture of me breaking the fin, and I ran that
Long
somewhere
Reef.
in here at Long Reef.
Yeah.
And because it was made out of chop strand and it just broke down the
Yeah.
guts. And then, as you know, Greeno made the fin after. Then I put one fin on and took it to California, and then Greeno put a real fin on, and that was
Made a big difference.
that's what made the difference to that board. It actually had snap, you know, but like, and nobody else had fins in America. They all had these giant big things called skegs on the back of their boards.
Yeah.
They didn't know anything about what was going on. So look, we had some with horsepower. And that's what stopped the act. You know?
Yeah.
That's what changed the act.
It's
It's a good picture of Byron Bay. With examples growing right in front of the sign saying "Welcome to Byron Bay."
marijuana growing in front of
Yeah, so it should be.
I think that what changed surfing in '66 so radically was our approach to the wave. You know, we were much more aggressive. At the same time that David Nueva was gliding on the nose, and you know, California was they're so engrossed in the nose riding era. We were attacking the wave with much more aggression. Not so much trying to kill the wave, but it was much more like we wanted to work deep around the curl, and we called it involvement. You wanted to be involved with the curl, the lip falling on you. You wanted to be able to nose ride in the pocket, not on the shoulder. You wanted to keep your cutbacks quick and snappy so you could hug the curl instead of just doing big graceful Phil Edwards type arcs. So I think that was what started the whole shift in surfing away from grace and glide, which was sort of the Hawaiian and Phil Edwards school. I think from '66 onwards, surfing took on this new nature where you tried to extract a lot more from the wave. But, you know, here we are in the Renaissance time when everyone's going back to the glide, which is pretty amazing. So the things are on the full loop now. That, you know, big, long logging boards are super trendy and groovy again, like they were in '66. But, you know, when I started shaping longboards again in the 90s, I got really serious. I needed to make a buck somehow. I was penniless. I'd been broke doing moulded surfboards. Nat said to me, just make logs. Make 60s logs. You'll do great. I went, nah, I'm not going to do 60s logs. I'm going to do high performance 940s. But that's what I was interested in. And, you know, it got me back on my feet. I had the Big M brand. It did good business. I managed to get back on my feet a bit. But now it's a real pleasure doing logs again. But Nat was trying to get me to do them 20 years ago. I'm a bit slow.
That's when you were doing that thing in Byron?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Did the moulded boards in Byron. You wanted to invest in it, and I said, don't invest in it, Nat.
Yeah.
I'll lose your money.
And prior to that, when you were really, things were going pretty bad, Bob, remember I got some boards just handmade by you.
Yeah.
That was
That's
good
right.
too.
To help me out, give me some business.
Yeah, no,
90,
you need
91,
That's
92.
what it's all about. Got to help each other out. That was
bet.
good.
The brotherhood.
I saw that board actually, one of those boards you did for me. It's under the house.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, good. It was based on a Takayama.
No, I saw that board. You know. Yeah.
And someone
Yeah.
stole the original from my factory. Yeah.
Well, they always do, don't they? You know.
Yeah.
It's always they all disappear. So what else can we tell? More stories about Byron Bay. I like stories about Byron.
About
Bay.
Byron, yeah. Okay.
I mean, I told some good stories about. Yeah, you got to realise that in that time there was probably only a couple of hundred surfers in the whole area here, right? You reckon there was 200? This is 71,
Yeah.
72,
Yeah,
when
yeah.
the explosion was just happening.
Yep.
And I had a mate who I'd spent a bit of time around the world with called Mickey Dora, and he was a very colourful character. He'd doubled for Frankie Avalon in all the Bonicello movies, the Muscle Beach Party and all that stuff. And he had some really good things to add. And I wrote about this in Nat's Nat. I was living, as I say, up in Bangalow Road then, and I came back to Byron, and he kept calling me every day. But you know, in those days we didn't have telephones at our houses either. You know, like we were doing it pretty tough. and he'd call the, he got the name of the local hotel, so he'd call it the Pier Astor over here. It's not called the Pier Astor anymore, is it?
The toppy, the top pub.
Yeah, the top pub. He'd call there, and they'd send up a car to come and tell me, and he'd just say, he'd talk to anybody. You know, he'd talk to, you know, somebody at the bar. He'd say, just put me on to somebody. I'm just trying to get a surf report and figure out what I'm doing. And so Dora had talked to this guy because he had a telephone that was tapped into, this was something that he'd stolen, which was a phone that could actually go through the satellites, and so he could ring in, and this was in 71, and he's dialed into the network somehow and got through to the beach hotel, and so a car had come flying up the road saying, with a guy out of the pub saying, oh, there's a guy called Mickey Dora on the phone, he really wants to talk to you. So I'd go back down with him, I'd go into the public bar, I'd pick up the thing, and I'm going, Mickey, what's up? What's happening? You go, yeah. He said, I need to know what the surf's like. And I go, okay. You go, yeah, it's really, you know, I think I can come down there next week, you know. I've just made a beautiful ticket. Yeah. That was in the days when you could make tickets. You know, he used to make perfect tickets. There wasn't any credit cards. Yeah. You know, it's just beautiful, you know.
You print out your own airline ticket and then get on the plane and find a seat.
Yeah, he had some girl in an agency steal the stock, and then he made his own. I saw the tickets. Beautiful things they were. Works of art. He spent hours on them.
What a scammer.
All of that before bloody...
Before computers.
Before computers.
Yeah.
So it's all...
Mickey Dora was the king of scammers.
Yeah, he was.
Well, yeah, he gets a couple of mentions in my book too. He wanted to drag me up to San Francisco for Rolling Stones concert. I was living in Ventura, and he rolled up in front of my house. I hear this bang on the door. I walk out, and there's Mickey's minder, and he says, "Mickey wants to talk to you." So I walk out of it's 101, the highway running up the coast then, and it's diverted now. And he opens the back door of a combi, and there's Mickey sitting in a leather lounge in the back of the combi. And the driver introduces himself, and Mickey says, "Bob, there's a concert. You know, you heard about the free concert up at San Francisco, the Stones. You want to come? Just jump in." I went, "No, I have my wife and baby there." And I went, "Nah, no, I'll pass, Mickey." "All right, you're missing out." Slams the combi door, bangs up the highway. But yeah, that's where that guy got beaten to death by the Hells Angels that night.
Oh, yeah, I read about that.
Yeah. But that's Dora, you know, like he always had drivers, he had stooges, people, we call them stooges, the stooges are all through the book. People who do your jobs for you, you know, as you get condiment to it. Dora, amazing guy.
Very colourful character. He used, when he was shooting one of those Annette Vinicello movies, Muscle Beach something and all that stuff, he kept setting the camera up. It was those big 35mm cameras, and they were shooting from the back of a boat. And they were shooting pictures of him doing the doubling for Frankie Avalon, and he's in his pose, you know, and he's riding along on waves. And he kept telling him to get in closer, to get, you know, closer and closer and closer. And they've got these big 35mm, and he could just see the wave starting to break, right? So it just wiped out the whole deal. So it's 35mm camera, and he did it right on dark. And the 35mm camera gets nailed straight down in Malibu, right in the sand. And then, terrible thing, you know, we've lost the camera, you know. So he's back there like 2 hours later, fishes it out and sells it back to him and got it all clear.
A big Arrowflex.
Yeah, it was an Arrowflex.
Yeah, those things are worth a lot of money right now.
They're probably collector's items now.
He told me while they were shooting those movies, the food truck, you know, where all the actors came along, the surfers just raided that truck. They'd all come up through the track up to the surf truck and just fill up. Before the actors could get there, they were all munched out.
Oh, he was a good guy. He spent a bit of time. He actually did come here to Byron, and then he came down to our place where we are now. And he really loved Australia, but he liked Bali best. You know, he spent a lot of time up there.
Yeah, wonderful guy.
Yeah, a colourful guy.
Yeah. My book starts off, in the very first story is about Lennox Head, and the last story is about Lennox Head, because I lived there for 30 years, and but Bay was where you worked, made boards. Lennox is where you lived and got away from the chaos of the Bay. Have a look around. This is the chaos of the Bay that we hide from at Lennox. So I'm back at Lennox again now, and it's nice and quiet. But Lennox, Nat and I surfed Lennox, like we were the first guys really, and our friends in our cars were the first guys to open Lennox up. You know, surfing it. It'd been surfed before. We surfed it first in 67, 68, had a beautiful winter there in 68. And we'd surfed it a bit before that, but we really got stuck into it from about 69, 70 onwards, and we started hitting there in 10-foot days plus, and the boards were developed to handle it. And through the early 70s, it was wonderful, wasn't it, Nat?
Well, a lot of mornings, sure Rusty will verify this, you actually weren't right here then. I guess you were in Lennox, but right here in the bay, there was like, I guess, a half a dozen surfers.
Yeah.
And some mornings I'd get going, you know, pretty early, and I'd have to go and make sure Russell was awake, and he was my next door neighbour, and make sure Garth was ready to go. And then we'd go and get Rusty, or Rusty, make sure that Rusty was out just down from the Honeyman's house. And then we'd go to and surf Lennox. I mean, I remember paddling out at Lennox often. I'd be the only person out in the water.
Yeah.
Just, you know, you're paddling out going,
Sure.
"Jeez."
Yeah.
And then you have to go in, you know.
I used to do that too through the mid-70s when I was living there. I was the first guy out. We had the house on top of the cliff. In the book here it shows the first house built on Lennox cliff top, and I built this wedge-shaped house because we were told you couldn't had to tie your dog down if you lived there, you know. You'd blow off the cliff.
I remember that house.
I built this wedge-shaped house so the wind would skip over it. But but I was the first guy out down the track at the beach. And there's a story in here about Rusty. Let's stick your hand up, Rusty. There's got quite a crowd here. Rusty Miller and myself and Warren Cornish. And there's a photo and a story of the biggest day we ever surfed at Lennox. And it was like rumbling, you know, the pinnacle, that thing that pops when it's 10 foot, that little bombing.
Was that day when Mick Fanning was the star, that really big day, not so long ago?
No.
10 years ago?
I'm talking 70s. And it was as big as any human could possibly paddle out.
They used to really get there.
Yeah, right. Way back then.
We were taking off on the pinnacle, you know, like that's way out. It's 200 metres further out than the regular takeoff. So there's, my wife snapped a shot of it, and with modern technology you can reproduce them quite well. And there was Rusty and myself and Warren were the only three that got out that day, and unforgettable. Yeah, so that's one of the last stories in the book, because my book goes up
Well,
to
that's
about,
probably pre-leg ropes, huh?
we just got them then. We were just inventing them, just developing them. You know, we had a piece of spear fisherman's spear gun cord and a rubber loop off a Hoover washing machine, which went round your leg and gave a little bit of stretch, and the rest was just a piece of string.
I remember the pre-leg rope days at Lennox. It was a curse if you actually screwed up.
Yeah.
Because the board would definitely get nailed, and then you'd definitely have to repair it. But we got very good at putting fins on right there on the beach.
Yeah.
In a number of hours, you know, just a half an hour, you could just stick the fin back on again with glass on the side.
Take resin and glass to the beach.
Yep.
Yeah. And
Stick it back on, and not the perfect job, but it was good enough. Because you only have one board with you then.
That's right.
You never travel with a
The quiver. Now, that's the weird bit. We only had one board. Yeah. I saw in the book he talks about Kenny Adler. Anyone remember Kenny Adler? There's a couple of hands. Kenny started San Juan surfboards in Byron Bay.
You did.
In 1966. Started first in Ballina, where Woolworths is now, and then he moved here in 67. And Ken's a great shaper, place getter in the world contest in Peru in the 60s. So Kenny's a tall blonde guy, and he ran San Juans, and we made our boards there for the first few years, Nat and I, when we first moved up there. And one day Ken lost his board, bang, 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 bounced on the rocks, got a couple of dings in it, paddles back out, and I'm paddling out, he's riding a 6-foot wave, the lip comes over, smashes him, the board just went bang and folded in two. Half hit his face, the other half hit behind his head, and he just went through it. So we just destroyed boards at
Lennox was...
At Lennox, without leg ropes.
I was just trying to find that picture that I ran of you and me and Ken Adler sitting on the front of the house up the top here in Bangalow Road.
Oh yeah.
When we were making surfboards together. Remember that?
Yeah, mate. Old Bangalow Road.
Yeah, I can't find it anywhere. Else. Maybe I can't find it.
I got a photo.
It's the same old thing trying to find photos, isn't it? You know?
There's one of my snaps here is an Albie Falzon shot. And Albie is the great guy who made Morning of the Earth. And there's an Albie Falzon shot of myself, George Greeno, Gary Keys and Chris Brock in front of an old house down at Yamba, in the sugarcane fields behind Yamba, where we made country soul surfboards.
They just knocked that house down.
They just knocked
Only
it down.
just recently.
Yeah, I know.
And they built another one in its place, but it doesn't look like it.
Now, my son and I had a look there like 18 months ago. Dug out a few old relics.
That's the original house up here in Bangalow Road, where we were.
Yep. Beautiful.
I thought I had a picture of us sitting on it, but maybe not.
Yeah,
Anyway, all good.
There's a big mansion right there now, Nat.
There is?
Yeah.
Good. So there should be.
It's a beautiful house.
I like to see change. It's always bizarre.
So how about we throw it over to the audience? I'm sure you've got some questions for Nat Young and Bob McTavish. Please.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Yeah, question for you, and maybe one for Nat later if there's time. Yeah, I'd just like to encourage you to elaborate a bit more on the drug scene that you mentioned in your book from 65, 67 onwards. In particular, Robbie Barnes, who was a very, very good friend of mine.
Yeah.
Look, there are all sorts of other names. I know Lester's probably here somewhere, but he's hiding. Love to catch up with him. Of course, to comment on the fact that us surfers behind the scene, particularly at Queenscliff where I was, knew what really happened to these guys, apart from what the coppers or the coroners might have had to say. So, just like to draw you on that out on that a bit, mate.
Robbie Barnes was, excuse me, he was a glasser at Dale Surfboards when I was shaping there in '69, and we were really a tight-knit bunch. I moved to Noosa in '70 when Nat was here, and I spent 6 months at Noosa with Kevin Platt. And so I missed out on Nat's adventures of riding the horses down to Broken Head and stuff. But when I was living with my present wife, her girlfriend Nat, and Julie, who was Robbie Barnes' girlfriend, moved in to the house we were living because Robbie had been killed. The police said he committed suicide at Manly Dam, but it was on the Friday. It was the day before a court case. He was a witness in a court case about a certain Avalon drug dealer. He was killed. He was hung and killed from a tree, as you mentioned. I think the tree it had been burnt in a fire, and he was hung, but he had no soot on his hands. We all knew that he'd been murdered, and we all knew it was a certain Avalon drug dealer.
Yeah, I remember it because he was glassing with me at Bennett's right then. He moved around, and he was Julie, and Julie was
She was a honey.
super good-looking chick, and so when we all knew Robbie, I was with him like a week before that happened. Yeah. And when I read about it in the Manly Daily, I did nothing about it. Obviously, it was foul play somewhere.
Yeah, and that's one of many, many, many. And in my book, there's quite a few others, crazy situations that happened, and it was pretty sad the whole utopian dream, which we thought. Well, Timothy Leary, I said this the other night. Timothy Leary said, if you drop acid with a girl, she'll love you the rest of your life. Plus, you'll have instant nirvana. So, who's not going to take acid, And same with marijuana, it was called window, so you could see the world properly and see into yourself. Because we were sort of on a spiritual quest, So that utopian culture from '67 onwards was, the Summer of Love in California and so on. It was really quite spiritual and quite idealistic. But it was a wonderful period, and everyone was seeing things new and seeing through different eyes, and with a great utopian vision and sharing love in all its forms. And but it's just tragic to see how it got corrupted by greed and selfishness. So my book deals a lot on that.
There were some funny aspects to that too.
Oh, yeah.
Like there was a lot of funny aspects to it. But some when Bob was talking, then it made me think about Timothy Leary and the Brotherhood of Eternal Love.
Yeah, with Mike Henson.
Which was just fantastic. Well, there was some amazing people that came here to Byron Bay in those days that were head honchos of the Brotherhood of Eternal Love, which was a group of They weren't surfers. They were just people that have made an awful lot of money from drugs, and they use surfing as their sort of, their vehicle for smuggling a lot of the time into California. And often they'd take unsuspecting young Australians that I knew two of them that did it. Where they were given money to go to Germany, buy a Mercedes and drive it back through Afghanistan, and we'll take care of everything when you get to... and they did. And it worked out really well for those guys. In those days you could, get away with that stuff, but boy, there was some... I think you actually, one way or another, you still pay. And they... both of those people, I don't know where one of them is, but I know the husband of that woman is dead,
Yeah.
So it's just, it's just not...
There's no free ride.
No free ride. No. Ain't no free ride.
Ain't no free ride. Any other questions? Yes, please.
Thanks, Bob. Because I've been a spoon rider, or was a spoon rider for years. I've had about 4 or 5 Haven spoons.
You're a sick man.
And I've still got one left, broken, but it's still
Committed.
Still got it. But look, out of interest, did George design them, or was it just
Totally.
That's the template.
Totally.
Thanks.
He had Villa, was it Villa the first one?
Velo, V-E-L-O.
Yeah.
Named after a Velocetti motorbike.
Yeah.
Yeah. Velo was, he came here in 64. He had a balsa spoon, rigid, no flex. Came back in 65 with a fully flexed one. And he made those right through to 69 when he put a hard edge on. And then he went to carbon fibre in the 70s and epoxy. And then in the late 70s he made windsurfers with full spoon windsurfers, which were amazing. He went so fast and banked so tight in his turns. And George hasn't ridden one for a long time. He's a mat surfer now, and if you go around to Wattigos, go around at 10 o'clock in any morning with a southerly, you'll see him out at Wattigos, going like a streak. This 70-year-old, crazy-looking, wonderful guy. It looks like a kid still at 70, and he's just streaking across waves on a half-deflated custom mat. So the spoon, good on you. So spoons went unreal when there was no crowds, because they draw very specific and sweet arcs on the power line. But once you've got people and you've got to steer around people, they don't do it. You lose all your speed.
What about when you're on a power line, Bob? If there's no power line, you're totally...
Exactly. But that was the pleasure of surfing in the 60s, from 67 to 71 or 72, when we had the first shortboards. There was no people. So every wave, you chose the most perfect power line. You could set up a bowl at Lennox that was 100 metres down the line, you knew you were going to get barrel. But you'd set it up from 50 metres before, because that was the highlight part of the wave, and there was no one in the way, and as soon as you had people paddling up the face, you've got to go around them, and so we had to develop hard edge boards that pivoted really quick, and that became the modern shortboard. And once you got down rails and stuff, but the hull is super soft all the way except for the trailing edge, and you really got to hit on the power line or they just die. Good on you. We admire you for continuing the dream.
Absolutely.
Yes, please.
You guys must have had a blast when you're growing up and through the evolution of professional surfing as well. What's your thoughts on where the ASP are taking pro surfing now? It's next year's going to be a big year, I think, for it, and it's could be make or break. What's your thoughts on that?
I'm not interested.
And I just wrote something for Surfing Australia for their book, or their, I don't know what it's called, a magazine, their quarterly magazine or annual magazine, whatever it is. I have an opinion that there's a few fundamental things wrong, but that the people that are really good, the top of their class, should be able to earn a living from what they do. But I also believe that there's a lot of, that in order for it to be commercially successful, surfing has to be different. It shouldn't be the same as all these other sports. And fundamentally, the first thing you should do is have women and men in the water together. And then you still give money to the highest placed woman and the highest placed man, but the interaction between men and women in the water together, I think, is something that's really fantastic. And also because we should be making statements that we're not sexist and we're not racist. And these are important. I think you can really do that when you start joining people together and joining sexes together. And also, these days it's been proven that women surf just as well as the men.
You just want to see cute little.
Many of them.
You want to see cute little butts when you're paddling out in the water.
Well, of course I do, but that's just my own sordid vested interest. But no, you're right, Bob. But I mean, it's still, you know, I stood on the beach there. Bell's Beach had a 50th anniversary year there. Rip Curl did. When was that? Last year, I think.
2 years. 2 years.
2 years, and I went down there for that. And my wife and I were invited down there, and we had a real nice time at Rip Curl's expense. But the bizarre thing was standing there on the end of Winky Pop at a place that I'd surfed for 20 years, and seeing Stephanie Gilmore pulling into a perfect barrel, and I'm just going, and you know, and she's outmaneuvering the men to get in there and surfing better, and I'm going, that's the future, you know. And it's the same with, I saw the picture on the Echo yesterday of Sally, you know, and you just go, unreal, you know, fantastic, you know. I think the future is not bad with professional surfing, as long as it's kept in perspective. Yeah. That's not what we all do it for. I think most of the people in the world of surfing do it for the pleasure of the activity, and that's what's got to be, you know, fundamental in your mind. But it is nice to have this recognition by the mainstream society.
Can cause problems in the water, though, don't you think, with overcrowding and hassling for waves, and it's teaching the youngsters about the inside rule.
Crowds.
Okay, good.
10 more minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. My wife and I make an art form of finding surf with no people, but we have to get well away from Byron to do that. So 2 or 3 days a week I disappear.
You know what? It's better. Sorry, Bob, but it's better to surf a shitty wave on your own or with someone than a really high quality wave with other people. I went out at Angara yesterday. I didn't go out because there was too many people around lunchtime. I went out in the afternoon when the wind had come on shore, and I had a wonderful time. I only got 10 waves. It was windy as hell, but boy, it felt good, you know. I came in and I felt good for that experience. And I think it's all about the personal feel good. You can find it. You can go surfing down past Belongil. You know, it may not be a perfect wave, but you can get them.
Just go a bit further.
Yeah,
and there's heaps of, I like big waves too, so when it gets over 6-8 foot.
Toe in, Bob?
My toe-in experiences were very limited. I actually talked.
Me too. I was being funny.
Yeah.
I was being silly.
I got damaged my first toe-in. I lost an eye. I've got I've got a plastic eye.
Stays away from that stuff when you're over 60.
Yeah. But we dreamed of it back in the day. We used to talk about it back in the 60s, toe surfing.
Oh, I love the idea, but I'm too old.
Yeah.
I love it. I love the fact that I'm too old.
Another question.
Yeah, thank you. It's a question for Nat.
Well,
and first off, it's great to see you looking so well. And my question is...
I got a shot of Synvisc in my knee yesterday. Again, this is my 3rd shot. I'm just loving it. It's my drug of choice now. And when it's synthetic, made from cockies cones. I guess you all know about that stuff. I love it. I told my doctor
I've had the shot too.
Talk about salt. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I just wanted to hear your version of what we all read about. It was a really fierce story, which did happen to you later in life, related to a fight and seeing you drift off the scene for a while.
Well, it wasn't a fight. It was just a complete assault. But I mean, I just simply, I don't fight. I've never fought. So I mean, my attitude is just that, you know, it's what happens when surfing gets so big that, you know, that guy worked as a bouncer and his whole thing was about fighting. That's how he solved his problems. We had some people do a check on him, and he solved his problems by, you know, he came from, you know, Hells Angels, western suburbs, and, you know, he was a fighter, you know, and you had to fight, you know, and he lived on his, so try to be understanding of the circumstances. But then the problem is with when you're a fighter and you get away with it, and you're a bouncer at the local pub, and that's what you do, eventually it's going to catch up with you. So it caught up with him, and they said, you know, you've got a choice. You can we'll either throw you in jail now, or we'll give you time off, and then you can go and spend, and you move out of town. That's, you know, because you've got to hold the job down. And he'd ripped off too many restaurants in Yamba, so they basically moved him on, you know, and I think he's on the Gold Coast now, and I hear that he's been keeping his nose clean. So it's, you know, it's all about, we're all on different paths and what we're doing. You know, I hope he's solved it all. That's it. Aggression doesn't get anywhere, I don't think. Violence is the very worst thing you can do, you know.
Has anyone got any questions about early Byron Bay? Because, you know, I started here in '56. And I've been living here sort of non-stop since 70.
56 for Christ's sake.
I was a 12-year-old kid, and there were sharks galore everywhere that day. It was still whaling then, and we were watching him haul whales down the old.
I remember standing on the end watching the sharks.
Yeah, heaps
on the
of
end
sharks.
of the pier.
The blood pipe coming out.
Yeah,
from
where
the
the
networks.
blood pipe came out.
It's pretty rad.
And McGettigan's Cafe.
McGettigan's cat. Mrs.
With-
McGettigan.
Yeah. Tweedledee and Tweedledum next door,
Yeah.
right?
The Ryan sisters.
The Ryan sisters.
That's where.
They were great.
That's where. Yeah, the Why Not is now, or the Eatery. It's called.
McGettigan took me home one time and said, you know, you look like you really need somebody to look after you. She lived in McGettigan's
Oh,
Lane
she
up
was
there.
beautiful.
Oh,
She lent me £10 once so we could legally drive back to Sydney, but fancy risking it £10 on me. I couldn't believe it.
These were the two people who owned the only restaurants in this town.
Yeah.
You know, and that was, and you know, and they were great supporters of surfers. You know, they were really good to us all. I think
Mrs. Mac was a gem, mate.
they got to love you. You know, they really.
I actually paid the £10 back. It took me
Good, Bob.
took me
I'm
6
glad.
months.
Yeah, I bet. I bet. I'm just pleased that you did pay it back. That's it.
Of course. I eventually
Of course
paid
you
my
did.
bills.
Yeah, right. No, it's all good.
Well, I guess that's about it. Nat,
We've done our bit.
my book is More Stoked, my second book, which basically runs right through to about the 80s. Adventures, quirky stories. I don't put a story in there unless it's quirky, so they're not worth telling boring stuff.
And Nat's Nat has got this book. You've probably all seen this anyhow.
Yep, it's pretty famous, Nat.
Well, it's sold 45,000. In fact, that's not quite true. It sold 45,000 less 25 copies. I kept one box for me at home, and there's one box of 12 here.
Is that it?
And that's all there is of the whole print run.
Far out.
Yeah, well, you can have it.
Get them their goal.
$30 because that's what people pay for. I can't undersell what my daughter sells them online, so that's why.
And this is published by HarperCollins, and $35 is their price. But it's semi-coffee table, 150 interesting photos. Yeah. So thanks, guys.
Yeah,
Thanks
it's
for
been a
listening.
pleasure.
Woo.
Right.